So here's a wild idea for you. What if getting rich has almost nothing to do with how smart you are and everything to do with how you act? That is the simple but powerful idea behind Morgan Housel's incredible book, The Psychology of Money. And we're going to dive into why it's so true. And to really get it, let me introduce you to someone who completely flips our whole idea of wealth on its head. This is Ronald Read. He lived a pretty simple life, fixing cars, sweeping floors in Vermont. Nothing about this guy screamed financial wizard. But when Ronald Read passed away at 92, the world discovered his secret. He was worth $8 million. And no, he didn't win the lottery, he didn't get a big inheritance, he just saved the little bits of money he could, put it into good, solid companies, and then he did the hardest thing of all. He just waited for decades. Now, get this. At the exact same time the world was learning about this secret janitor millionaire, another story was breaking. This one was about Richard Fuscone, a top-level finance exec, Harvard-educated, the whole nine yards, and he was declaring bankruptcy. You see the difference? Fuscone had the fancy education, but he was greedy. Read had zero training, but he had something much more powerful: patience. That little difference in behavior changed everything. And that right there, that's the central idea of this entire book. See, managing money isn't a hard science. It's a soft skill. Your behavior, your temperament, your patience, that stuff is way more important than any formula on a spreadsheet or a fancy degree hanging on your wall. Okay, so if it's all about how we behave, why do we constantly see people making financial decisions that just look completely nuts to us? Well, the book's first big idea is pretty simple. No one is crazy. We all see the world through our own little keyhole, right? A keyhole that's been shaped by our unique life experiences. The lessons you learned about money growing up, from your parents, the economy, your first job, they are way more powerful than anything you learn in a book. That tiny sliver of personal experience pretty much defines 80% of how you think money works. Just look at this. On the left, we've got the stock market. If you were coming of age in the 80s and 90s, you saw stocks go up nearly tenfold. You would learn that investing is awesome. But if you were born just 20 years earlier, you saw stocks go absolutely nowhere for years on end. You'd learn to be skeptical. Same thing with inflation on the right. These aren't just numbers on a chart. They create deep, powerful instincts about money that stick with us for life. So our personal experience is one thing we don't control. But there are two other massive forces out there that we tend to ignore: luck and its identical twin, risk. The story of Bill Gates is a perfect case study. Now, don't get me wrong, the guy was brilliant and he worked incredibly hard, but he also had a 1 in a million stroke of pure luck. His high school happened to be one of the only schools in the world with a computer back in 1968. He had a best friend, Ken Evans, who was right there with him, just as smart, just as driven. They were going to conquer the world together. But while Bill got a dose of luck, Kent got hit with a 1 in a million dose of pure risk. He died in a climbing accident before he even graduated. It's the same force, just pointing in opposite directions. And it's such a powerful reminder that financial outcomes, whether they're good or bad, are never, ever 100% due to your own efforts. Understanding the role of luck should make us all a little more humble when things go well. But what happens when people forget that? Well, they fall into one of the most dangerous traps in finance: the inability to know when you have enough. Just look at these two guys. Rajat Gupta was worth $100 million. Bernie Madoff had a legitimate business that was making him tens of millions a year. They had it all, more money than they could ever spend, but they wanted more. So they risked the things they had and needed, like their reputation and their freedom, for something they didn't have and definitely didn't need. The perfect antidote to that kind of destructive thinking comes from this brilliant story. The author Joseph Heller is at a party at some billionaire's mansion, and someone points out that the host made more money in one single day than Heller's classic novel Catch-22 had made in its entire history. And Heller's reply is just perfect. He says, "Yes, but I have something he will never have: enough." So how do we find our own sense of enough? Well, first, you gotta realize that the hardest skill in finance is getting the goalposts to stop moving. The real enemy here is social comparison. Because let's be real, there will always be someone with more. Enough is just realizing that an endless appetite for more is only going to lead to regret. At the end of the day, some things, like your reputation, your family, your freedom, are just not worth risking. Ever. All right, so if taking huge risks to get more is a trap, what's the single most powerful tool for actually building wealth? Turns out, it's not about being the smartest guy in the room or making the riskiest bets.
Check this out. On one side, you have Jim Simons. He's a math genius who is arguably the greatest investor of all time. His average annual return? 66%. That just completely crushes Warren Buffett's already incredible 22% average. Okay, so why then is Warren Buffett almost 4 times richer? I mean, Simon's returns are 3 times better. How does that math even work? The answer is one simple word: time. A mind-boggling $81.5 billion of Buffett's fortune was earned after he was already eligible for Social Security. You see, Buffett's skill is investing, sure, but his real secret is time. He's been a great investor for over 75 years. That is the magic of compounding. Good returns that you can sustain for a really, really long time will always beat incredible returns that fizzle out. So at the end of the day, building real wealth isn't about hitting home runs. It's about getting pretty good returns that you can stick with and not interrupt for the longest possible time. And that leaves us with maybe the most important question you can ask yourself. What is that one simple, sustainable financial behavior that you can commit to for the rest of your life? Because that right there is where true wealth is built.